Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be reading the entirety of the KINGMAKERS series by Sophie Lark. Now, if you've watched any of my videos in recent months, I recently finished the second book in the series, and I wasn't entirely sold on whether or not I would continue until the very end of that book. And then I decided, you know what, I need to read this third book, and at this point, why don't I just finish off the series? So I figured this vlog would be a really good opportunity to collect the footage of the first two books that I read, put them in here, and then read the last part of the series. Have it all in one place, and we can see the evolution, hopefully, of me sort of feeling like ambivalent about the series to feeling excited and happy about it. I will say as of now, as of filming this intro right now, I finished the third book and I did really enjoy it, so I have high hopes for the other two books in the series, and honestly, I'm just excited to document the process of reading this honestly beloved series with all of y'all. So without any further preamble, let's get into the vlog portion of this video, and then I will meet you back here for present day. I finished The Air by Sophie Lark yesterday, and I didn't get to vlog it because of construction noise. It was so loud that I didn't even attempt to get my camera out, and frankly, I think that was a good decision. I needed to simmer with my thoughts on this book for a little bit and really evaluate what didn't work about it. I actually took notes on my phone, which is not something I normally do when I vlog, but you know what? I wanted to be thorough because, wow. So The Air by Sophie Lark is about the KINGMAKERS Academy. In this version of reality, the mafia across the globe in different locales sends their youth to a school where they learn how to become young mafiosas and mafiosos, I suppose you could say. In our particular story, we have two, I guess you could say, main characters. We have Leo and Anna, who have grown up together and basically been cousins for each other. Leo is this like super tall, super hot basketball player who gets a full ride scholarship to the University of Kentucky and turns it down to go to KINGMAKERS Academy. And then we have Anna, who is a dancer and expresses herself through dance, but she's not meek and timid like I feel like a lot of dancers are unfortunately categorized in romance. She is badass and she wears combat boots and has super dark makeup that she wears to sort of ward off attention or fend off attention from men. But of course she's like super beautiful, so that doesn't really work. And they decide that they're gonna go to this KINGMAKERS Academy for some reason. Neither Anna nor Leo's families are encouraging them to go to this academy, I guess you could say, but they decide that they're going to do this. This is part of their future. They want to be the leaders of their family, you know, going forward, and that's what they decide to do. Even though they're like cousins, their families are not actually related, and they are in charge of different mafias. So they go to this KINGMAKERS Academy off the coast of Croatia, and they get to meet people from across the globe. You get people from Japan, people from Russia, people from like across the globe that are going to one day rule mafia land or whatever. You also have different categories of people on the island. You've got enforcers, spies, heirs, and accountants. You get put into one of these four categories. You are going to learn how to be a mafia person. You go after the age of 18, which I didn't say, but that's sort of the gist of this story. It's an interesting premise. I'll give it that much. Like, I was very much hooked. I liked the idea of this setting. The school itself is supposed to be hundreds and hundreds of years old, so it's supposed to be beautiful. And, you know, I love an academic setting. I think that's a really fun place to have tension and have, you know, stakes in a book. The issue that I had, as if there are multiple. Let me try to break it down. Okay, first off, the writing of this book. I think I already pointed out that this book was too long. It was 500 plus pages, and there was absolutely no reason for that. A lot of what happens in this book is uneventful, which is surprising given, I think, the stakes that the author is trying to build. There is a competition aspect to the story where like freshmen, sophomores, juniors, whatever, they compete to have bragging rights, essentially, which should be interesting. That should add stakes. Also, you know, a competitive academic setting is stressful enough as it is. And then also friends to lovers, like that could be exciting, but we didn't need 500 pages to get there. It made no sense. On top of that, not only was it too wordy and too long, everybody sounded the same. We actually have three POVs in this book. We have Anna, Leo, and then we have the villain and or like other love interest, Dean, and he is technically related to Leo. He is actually Leo's cousin. They kind of compete for Anna's affections, right? Why were there three POVs? Because it was very clear from the beginning that Leo was going to end up being Anna's person. I don't think that's a spoiler to say, I think, if you thought otherwise when you were reading. Logic is not there for you, my friend. It just didn't make sense for me to have three POVs and one POV that just doesn't matter. I mean, maybe he gets his own book later. I would doubt it given the actions that he takes in this book that I feel like are unforgivable. But again, it was an odd decision, I think, to have a third POV when he is not actually someone who is going to end up with our heroine. It just didn't make sense. Also, again, everybody sounded the same. I think it's pretty safe to assume that most male POVs in a romance story written by women are not going to be necessarily super authentic. However, I feel like it was very glaringly obvious in this story that the male POVs were written by a woman. The way that Leo described certain things, it just didn't feel like it was a male POV, and not only was it not feeling like a male POV, it felt too much like every other character. Like, I was in the middle of chapters and forgot who was talking. Yeah, honestly, all of my issues really come down to the writing because I liked the idea of the story. I liked, you know, this Kingmakers Academy setting, but unfortunately, it just all kind of fell apart with that writing. It just did not work for me, and I just don't understand why this was 500 pages. I think had this been retooled in some way, it could have been really effective. I think a love triangle is perfectly fine. I think friends to lovers is perfectly fine, but I felt no sexual tension between any of our characters, and I really feel like any sort of angst and tension that was going to be built with some of the kind of school plot lines was broken with it being such a long book. So that was me babbling for a long time. I don't know if any of that was coherent, but it didn't work. It did not work for me in any regard. I'm giving this book 2 stars. I guess I'm glad that I finished it, so I don't have to have another DNF on my record in this video, but I wouldn't recommend it. All of that being said, the writing wasn't so abhorrent or unreadable that I wouldn't try another book from this author again, but I think this series is just not it for me. This book is about our main characters, Zoe and Miles. Zoe, at the beginning of the book, is promised to a guy in the mafia named Rocco. He is going to somehow provide some valuable alliance to Zoe's family. Her dad is kind of an asshole, and so is her stepmom, and so they're like marrying her off to this guy who has value in a business sense, right? And he is, I think, just a year older than Zoe, so he's not like a creepy old man, but he is sadistic. The beginning of the story, I was like sort of confused because I didn't read the description of this book or like the synopsis before going into it, so I was like, oh my god, this man does something horrible, or this boy does something absolutely horrible at the start of the story, and I'm like, please fucking tell me he's not getting a redemption because I don't want to read his story. Luckily, I found out after a little bit of digging that Zoe is not actually wanting to marry this man. I mean, obviously, but it's not going to be like an enemies to lovers situation. She's going to get with someone else instead, and that person is Miles, who is the son of some mafia people. I don't know who they are. Present in other books, I think in the Brutal Birthright series. That's the one thing I will say. I don't really care about the lineage of characters and stories, right? Love Penelope Douglas, but I don't really care about the fact that the people that are going to be in the spin-off series are like the kids of the people in the original series. Does that make sense? Like, I just don't care, and in the series, I certainly don't care. There's like too much in terms of complicated hierarchies and like family trees. I don't give a shit. So I don't know anything about these characters or their parents, but Miles, needless to say, is the son of some sort of like mafia people because he is going to go to Kingmakers Academy. So is Zoe. I think Zoe's been going for a while, and so is this man, Miles. Miles is really wanting to be some sort of like successful, I don't want to say producer, but like he wants to make money, right? He wants to have a part in like making things happen. He wants to be like the man behind the curtain. He is trying to do that a little bit at Kingmakers, is kind of what it's seeming like. And then Zoe is obviously just trying to survive at Kingmakers, and things are complicated because she is trying to avoid her betrothed at Kingmakers since they're like both going there. I think Rocco's in his like last year or something like that, but she ends up kind of fucking up because Rocco gets mad at her and essentially convinces Zoe's dad to let Zoe's youngest sister, who's supposed to be going to art school, go to Kingmakers instead. And so Zoe's not super happy because Kingmakers is this like brutal place and her sister's so tame and like sweet and we don't want her to go there. Things are complicated, and I think it'll be interesting because Kat, the younger sister, does have a POV in the story, and I don't know how much of a POV. I just know like the next chapter I'm reading is Kat's POV. So I am liking this already off the bat more than the first book. I feel like the first book was needlessly long, and I'm sure this one is going to be as well. But that one, I don't know, I just didn't really buy the friends to lovers thing, and I'm gonna reread it soon and like maybe see if my thoughts and opinions have changed, but didn't love that one. This one, however, it's a little more promising. I feel like the setup is a little bit more, I don't want to say believable or convincing, but to the point. Like, we're getting there. I know what's gonna happen. It makes sense. I'm already buying into what's going on. So according to my Kindle, I'm 13% into this book, and I feel like I haven't been reading for that long, so I don't think this is as long as the first book in the series. Not that it fucking matters, but I'm gonna keep reading it tonight. But I probably won't update you until tomorrow because this was hard to film. I have scrambled egg brains, truly, really and truly. So I'm gonna read a little bit, talk to you tomorrow, and we'll finish up this vlog and this book. Okay, so I've gotten about 50% into The Rebel by Sophie Lark, and I can say with some degree of certainty that it is better than The Heir was. I think for me, it is because the romantic relationship at the center of this story is not a sort of like half-baked friends to lovers thing. As much as I love friends to lovers, I feel like if you're not gonna take the time to really show us the basis of that friendship, what's the fucking point? It could read as any other like kind of insta-lovey story, you know? This one is tough for me because I like the plot of the story, but I'm not super invested in the romance between Zoe and Miles. I'm really rooting for Kat and her place at Kingmakers. I really want Zoe to get out from under the thumb of Rocco, and I want to see like what Miles does with his empire, but I'm just not really invested in Zoe and Miles' relationship, which is frustrating because I liked the idea of Miles being a savior, but strangely, it's not like over the top enough for me. Like, I think if you're gonna have this sort of like savior plotline, fine. I want it to be really dramatic. I want it to be kind of epic and grand proportions. And while there was like kind of a cool altercation between Rocco and Miles where I was like, oh shit, like this is going to be interesting and good, I just don't feel like it's really manifested into anything particularly interesting. Granted, I'm only 50% in, and I'm hoping that as I continue to read, there are going to be some like explosive moments. I just feel like so far I'm a little bit not bored, because again, like I am invested in reading this book. I'm getting through it fairly quickly. It's just there's something missing there, and I think that is the romance, which I just find fascinating because so many people say that like Sophie stories are these like really raw and emotional and like spicy things, and I have just not really seen that or felt that to be the case. Like there definitely are some like riskier scenes, like Zoe and Miles end up like hooking up in the library at one point. There wasn't really much lead up there, and like we're told repeatedly that Miles and Zoe know each other, but they aren't like friends per se or whatever, and like I didn't really see a good progression from them going to being like acquaintances to something more. It's just like he saves her once and then like they have some sort of like deep feelings for each other, and I just like I don't get it. Like there's no basis for this romantic relationship. So I'm gonna keep reading. I think like at this point my feelings about the book are kind of like 3-star material. I am becoming more invested in the world of Kingmakers. I like some of the plot points, especially Kat's journey. I really want to see kind of where she ends up and if she ends up having a love interest, but so far I'm just like kind of ambivalent about the romance, which is kind of tricky in a book that is peddling itself as a romance. Okay, I'm like 75% in, and something wild just happened. I'm gonna put a spoiler warning right here in case for some fucking reason you want to pick up this book. You've been warned. Okay, why the fuck is there a public execution in this book? There was kind of a brawl that takes place between Miles and Rocco and some of their goons and fellow friends. It basically ends up like one of the friends, Ozzy, ends up stabbing a guy in the neck, kind of on accident, and the guy ends up bleeding out. And so Ozzy is going to be publicly executed, but we find out that he is not actually executed. His mom gets executed in his place. What the fuck? I don't even know what to say, honestly. This book is just so unhinged and just out there. Not the whole book, right? But like some of the things that take place at the school. And you know what? I think it is for me that like not only is the romance kind of but the tone of this book is just odd. It's kind of dark and depressing and not in a fun way. I hate to draw comparisons to a certain magical school series, but it feels like that, but like darker, like in the last couple of books in that series. Like that's kind of vibes I'm getting here. And I'm not saying that I expected like a mafia school to be an upbeat place, but I don't know. I'm just like not vibing with it, and maybe that's just like I've been reading too many dark and depressing things lately, but I'm just like, how? I don't know. I will say though, the romance is getting better. There have been some slightly romantic moments. Miles kind of goes out of his way to treat his lady to some like popcorn and movies, even though movies and like everything basically technologically they're banned from. So it was sweet that he like went out of his way to make her happy, whatever. But I don't know. I'm still like not sold on the romantic component of this. And I know that I said at the beginning of like this clip, me reading these books, not this clip, but like me reading this book in particular, that I would maybe read the Kingmaker series in its entirety for a video. I just like don't know if that's really something I want to do. Even if this turns out to be higher than a 3-star read, I just don't think I want to become invested in the series. It's just not worth the investment. I don't think. Sure, the world's interesting and sure it's well written, but I just like, if I don't love the romances, what's the fucking point? Okay, so I finished The Rebel by Sophie Lark, and I'm rethinking my thoughts. I do think I want to continue on with the series. God damn it. I think it was really clever to include Kat's POV because now I'm invested in reading Kat's story, and I'm pretty sure that I know who she's going to end up with. I'm here for it. I'm invested. The ending of the book I thought was pretty solid, if a little bit unbelievable and cheesy. So we have Miles, and he ends up striking up a deal with some members of various mafias so that he can win, I guess you could say, Zoe. Instead of Zoe having to marry Rocco, some other events happen. And I don't think that's much of a spoiler to say. I think it's like pretty much implied in the way the story goes down. And there are some other kind of juicy things that happen that I will not spoil, mostly because I really don't want to have to put spoiler warnings at the end of this. It was a pretty good ending. I don't think the story is going to get more than 3 stars for me, but I feel like it's a very solid 3 stars. I can't remember what I gave the first book, but I want to say it was 2. So like maybe upward trajectory from here. I just really want to know what happens in Kat's story. Like I'm very invested. She went from this like shy wallflower to now wanting to kind of carry on with her degree and become a spy. There's like 4 different houses, I guess you could say. There's like spies, enforcers, heirs, and accountants, I guess. She's a spy and she's excited to carry on with her education and also maybe fall for someone. So yes, like I said, I enjoyed parts of this book. I'm invested in this world, but I felt like this romance was kind of weak. I do like that the characters ended up together. I do like that Zoe and Miles like supported each other's dreams and and like that was important. But I feel like there could have been more romantic moments. Like there was that, again, one scene where Miles does something sweet for Zoe, but I don't feel like there were enough romantic relationship development moments for it to be a really like solid and swoony romance. But maybe that wasn't the intention, I don't know. Like maybe this is supposed to be more about the world and the plots, but I don't feel like as a romance it was perfect, but it was a fun story. It's now present day and I am ready to find out what happens in Kat and Dean's story. So let's get into it. This is doing things for me. To me? For me? All of the things. I'm like 15-20% into The Bully, the book that started it all. And by started it all, I mean this is the book that encouraged me to start this vlog, because the first two books in the series didn't totally do it for me. You've seen the vlog clips before this, right? Now we're in present day. Now I'm going to be talking about this book that is actually quite satisfying. So I wanted to get a little bit into this book so I could give you a good synopsis of like what it's going to be about, because I knew it was going to be this interesting dynamic between Kat and Dean that was sort of set up at the end of the last book, right? But I didn't know what the plot of the book was going to be. I still don't totally know, but I do know what their relationship is. So we open up this book with Dean very much kind of collecting on his promise to Kat that she is going to do anything that he tells her to, because he knows that she murdered someone on campus. The punishment for killing someone on campus is an eye for an eye, so she would be unfortunately murdered at her own school. So to keep the promise, she is doing whatever he says, and I'm not gonna lie, it's already deeply erotic. To me at least. Like, I'm actually enjoying their dynamic. Is it healthy? No. Is it functional? Also no, but that's sort of the whole point of the book. Dean, we see at the very beginning, is dealing with his relationship with his father. He is also trying to just really secure his spot as an heir. I thought that his father was in charge of the mafia in Russia, but he's actually not. He's like second or third in command of one portion of the Russian mafia, so he's really not that important, but Dean is supposed to take over for like the head boss in their particular part of Russia. So there's a lot weighing on his shoulders. He is being trained by, I think, a guy who has his own book. I think his last name is Snow or something. He has come to this school with his wife, I guess. Like, she's gonna be the interim doctor, and then Snow is gonna be this like boxer legend kind of guy, and like teaching some of the more skilled fighters how to like truly fight well. And Dean has already kind of gotten his ass beat by Snow because he's too cocky and confident and was like, oh, I could take anyone here. Sorry, my AC just kicked on. But Kat is trying to sort of manage her role here, I guess, at Kingmakers Academy. She is back because she wants to learn more. She wants to be someone who has confidence and skill, and she's already kind of showing that she does have some skill. She had like an interrogation class, and she has to go up against one of her classmates, and while she was super nervous, she ended up winning this game, I guess you could say, this interrogation game. You can tell she's trying to like hone her skills, and then at the same time she's trying to make sure she doesn't get caught for murder. Entertaining so far. There's a scene where she is feeding grapes to Dean in the cafeteria, and I was into it. He's bossy in a way that I enjoy. Could be wrong, but I think this is definitely a take on the like Dramini kind of story. I'm into it. I'm very into it. I'll be curious to see like what the main thread of the plot is, if it's just going to be the dynamic between Kat and Dean, like her having to obey him and like that constant threat of being exposed. I feel like there's got to be more to it, but haven't gotten there quite yet. But I'm along for the ride. I'm 50% in, and I am really, really enjoying this book. I knew that this was going to be the one that I would enjoy out of all of the ones in this series. If I were going to enjoy one of the books in the series, it would be this one, and it's just not letting me down. I feel like my issue with Sophie Lark's books in the past have been that there's just kind of a lack of, not chemistry, but there's a lack of deep emotional depth, and is that present in this book? No. But the kind of like smuttiness and the attraction between the two characters is making up for it. Already I feel like I'm having more interactions between Kat and Dean than I've had with any of the other heroes and heroines in her other books that I've read, at least. This dynamic really works for me, and I know it's a dynamic that works for a lot of people too. I like the hero who can't admit feelings but definitely has them for the heroine. There's a scene where Kat ends up getting in some trouble because, you know, she's kind of, I don't want to say the scapegoat, but everybody just thinks like, oh, she's not a very talented spy and like we can just treat her like shit. In the kind of like lead up to the Cordum Bellum yearly competition that they have between the different grade levels, she is like forced to climb this wooden structure. She ends up getting buried underneath a bunch of piles of logs, and Dean freaks out, takes her to the infirmary, I don't know, watches over her and stuff, and he's just like very gentle with her. And after this happens, they meet up a couple of days later, and he's just really tender with her. I don't want to say treats her with respect, but like he's really nice to her, and he kind of divulges some of not necessarily his feelings towards her, but talks a little bit more about his upbringing and his like childhood trauma. So at least we're getting some sort of like intimacy there, which I'm appreciating, because I just don't feel like we really had that in the other books. I don't feel like there was an intimacy. It's like, oh, I really like that you want to run a powerful empire, and I'm like, okay, like the characters kind of complement each other in this case, and I like them, you know? I think it's fun. I will say there has not been much in the way of like plot line here. Like there's not a whole lot going on. I'm not upset at it, but I think if you really enjoyed the plot lines of the first 2 books, you will be disappointed that there's maybe not something kind of overarching here. I'm sure something's going to come up. I am sure that Kat's secret is going to come into play more, and that the whole Dean training with Snow thing like will come to a head and will be important at some point. But at this point, it's just like he's training, he's becoming more trusting of Kat. It's one of those books that's making me squeal internally, and I like that and I appreciate that. There's not very many romances that like do that for me anymore, so whenever I find one that like really gets me giddy and excited, I know it's one that I'm going to rate highly, even if like the romance at the core of it is not necessarily something that I'm like 100% on board with. This could surprise me. This could become a really like emotionally raw and intimate story, and then in that case like I'd feel totally justified in giving it like 4 or 5 stars. So I mean, right now I'm feeling like this is a 4-star read. I would recommend it. Like it's a fun time, but I'm hoping that the rest of the series kind of continues on in this vein, because I'll be really disappointed if this was just like a one-off situation and circumstance. I think it bodes well because my plan for today was to like read this entire book and then finish it, and I'm already 50% in, so like obviously I like it enough if I've gotten this far. Okay, so I finished The Bully last night and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can't really decide if I want to give this one 4 or 5 stars. It was just so enjoyable. It was everything that I wanted it to be, but it still wasn't a perfect romance, and I think that maybe I just need to come to terms with the fact that Sophie Lark doesn't write my perfect kind of romance, and that's okay. You can still be a really good author and not write specifically for me. This book didn't actually evolve into a whole lot of plot at all, and I think maybe that's why I ended up enjoying this one more than the previous books in the series. We definitely had the atmosphere and the same feel, I would say, overall in this book that we did to the other books, but I felt like we had more time and emphasis placed on the relationship, and I did see some really nice character growth on the part of both our hero and our heroine. The only thing I think I would have liked to see a little bit more was Kat's development as a spy. You can definitely see that she is becoming more comfortable in her role and is enjoying her time at school more, but I feel like there were a couple of plot lines in that regard that I would have liked to see come into fruition just a little bit more. But that being said, I still enjoyed it. So the only like real plot things that happen, I would say, are that whole Kat having murdered a man sort of thing does come to a head when she is overheard talking on the phone to her sister about it, basically admitting, hey, I killed this man, and her rival at school, this girl named Lola, ends up overhearing her on the phone, ratting her out to the chancellor, I think is the title of like the principal at the school, and Dean ends up getting called to this like torture chamber, I guess, in her stead. She is called to watch him get tortured. They both get out of the situation and no one is punished. So it feels a little low stakes, even though Dean does get tortured and I think whipped. Unfortunately, there is really no repercussions after that. Like no one ends up getting charged with the murder of this man. That plot just kind of like falls apart. There is really no repercussions of the whole like Lola versus Kat plot line. Lola does get her head shaved, which like honestly kind of an iconic move on Dean's part, but I kind of wish we could have seen Kat fight her own battles in that regard. I think it would have been a little bit more satisfying. I think what kind of stood out to me though was the vulnerability that Dean showed throughout the story. I really liked seeing him go from this like very heartless alpha type to being someone who is very capable of emotion. I just feel like oftentimes when we have heroes like this, I guess my mind is immediately going to Twisted Love, the first book in that Anna Huang series. The hero in that book like is only soft for the heroine, and I do like that trope, I guess, but I do prefer when the hero who is emotionally stunted and damaged ends up treating all of the people around him with respect after he kind of goes through his own emotional journey. And you definitely get that in this book, which I liked. I mean, I think that is ultimately the goal, right? Like to have a man be nice generally. A good example would be Sadist from the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. Like he has a lot of emotional trauma and baggage. He works through it and then he's like kind to pretty much everyone. I mean, he still has some bite, let's be honest, but like, you know what I mean? I like a full transformation in that regard. There are 2 other notable things I want to touch on before we move on to the next book. Number 1 would be the groveling / role reversal that happens. We do have Dean kind of fuck up and be really cruel to Kat whenever she tries to do something nice for him that he didn't appreciate. So in order to win Kat back and like make their relationship go back to normal for them, she insists that he grovel in the form of being her servant for a month. He does this, and I appreciate that, honestly. Like I don't like when one character is mean and then there's never any repercussions for that. I don't know. It felt appropriate. I appreciated the kind of like role reversal and the comeuppance, if you will, of Dean. Something unrelated, but I think will lead us well into the next book. There wasn't a lot of plot in terms of Kat and Dean in this book, but we do get hints that there is something that is going to be really explosive in this next book. If you didn't know, the first 4 books in the series are a complete series. The 5th one is like a standalone in the same universe. So this 4th book, The Spy, is going to be a book that really centers on a character who I don't think we know the name of yet, and we do get a couple of POV chapters from the spy. I don't really understand at this point what the spy is supposed to be doing. I just know that there are some kind of weird connections going on. It seems like Snow and his wife have some sort of strange connection to the librarian, who I can't remember the name of. We also know that like the Chancellor's maybe not the best guy, and like he might have something to do with something. It seems like there's a big conspiracy at play. I think Sophie Lark has said that they're like Easter eggs in this series that kind of come about in the fourth book, or like, you know, make sense in the fourth book, and like, oh, go reread the series, you understand everything. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to read this fourth book and we're going to see where these threads take us. I am very curious. There has been like whisperings of, I think, a guy named Hedion's like trying to find Hedion. I don't know how to say his name. He is trying to find his mother. There also might be a student sleeping with the librarian. I don't know. There's just a lot going on, and I'm curious to see what happens and who our hero and heroine are in this next book, because honestly, I have no fucking clue. Okay, I'm 15% into The Spy by Sophie Lark. How many times am I going to say the author's name, even though all of these books are by her? It's going to be a lot, because that's what I'm used to. I am enjoying it. I am appreciating the lead up. I'm appreciating the Easter eggs that have been planted, and I thought I would be too stupid to pick them up, but I like the groundwork that has been laid for this story. So the first chapter opens up with our hero, the spy. We don't know his identity, but we get to see kind of what led him to this point, I guess you could say. Basically awoken in the middle of the night by gunfire in his home. So him, his sister, his mother, and his father, they end up kind of trying to escape. Everybody's like wielding AK-47s and it's just generally being badasses and trying to get out of there. But I think his father ends up dying as a result of this altercation, and we find out that it was, I believe, is it Morkov or Markov? This kind of big bad Ukrainian mafia dude. He was a part of this attack, right? And so our hero is definitely holding a grudge. He wants to seek revenge. And a couple of chapters later, we find out who our hero is. And as I sort of suspected, it is Ares Cirillo. Maybe? Kind of? We find out, honestly, that Ares isn't really who he says he is. He's not just a humble fisherman or like Greek farmer's son. He's actually part of the Bratva in Russia, like one of the most powerful families. I'm not really understanding how the math is mathing there, but he is the heir to part of the Russian mafia, I guess, and he is going to be a head honcho and take over if he can get some sort of information that he needs. We don't really know what his main objective is. Obviously, it's to seek revenge, but we don't know what the underlying plot is there. His mom is actually the librarian at the school, so I was wrong in my assumption that someone would be fucking the librarian. It's just her son. There's nothing romantic going on there, which we appreciate. We don't need any Cassie Clare moments. Anyway, that is our hero. Our heroine is the daughter of the Ukrainian mob boss that everyone seems to loathe and is like very, very scared of. For some reason, have like one mob family who is scarier than all the rest. I kind of like that. I think it's more fun that way, and I like that we've had the lead up until this point, because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, in a lot of romance series, especially when like all of the heroes are, you know, scary bad guys, you have to make each one like successively more scary. And in this series, we know that the Ukrainian mob is like the scariest of all of the mobs the whole time. So we're getting this lead up and we're like, okay, is this going to go anywhere? And we do know now that our heroine is the daughter of the scary Ukrainian mob boss. Anyway, Ares, who is not really Ares, who's pretending to be Ares, so like no one suspects who he actually is. We don't actually know his name. The spy is just how I'll refer to him from now on. He is going to have to try to get close to his mortal enemy. I don't really know what her deal is. I just know that no one really wants to be friends with her because she is a part of this really scary family. You know what's bad? When all of these scary mob children don't want to be your scary mob friend. Interesting dynamics. I don't know much else other than that. Like, I'm sure that our heroine is going to have some sort of like something going on. I don't know if her only conflict is going to be trying to make friends in this book, but I'm curious to see where our hero goes. And I guess I'm also interested too because we had some characters in other books like looking for their family and things like that, so I'm wondering if that's going to come into play in this book as well. But so far, I'm interested. Only thing I'm a little bit wary of is the potential for there to be lying involved in the relationship, and I think I'll be okay with it just given the way that this story is set up and given that it's like a mafia story. I'm willing to overlook certain things, but I don't typically like when a hero has to lie to the heroine. He'll be lying about his identity. Granted, he's lying to everybody about his identity, it's not just the heroine, but he's also probably going to be lying about the fact that he has any interest in her because he technically hates her, right? So yeah, I'll be interested to see kind of where things go, but I'm tentatively excited and I have been interested, and this book is not taking me that long to get through, despite the fact that it's 500 pages. I think I'll probably just update you at 50% because I'm pretty fucking lazy today. Okay, if you hear any background noise, that's Nugget purring, but I'm 50% into The Spy, and I am enjoying it despite not much really happening. That being said, I do think Sophie Lark is really laying the groundwork for the plot of this book, which is really exciting to me. In some of the previous books, like I mentioned, she's had third POVs that I think make the story interesting. In this book, we're having the POV of the fathers of the story. We have Nyx's father interacting with Aries' father, and it's very interesting seeing like the relationship that was built and maybe where the betrayal is going to come in. We're already kind of getting some like seeds of discontent sown, and I'm wondering like how that's going to play into what's happening in the present day. Now, in the present day timeline, we've had the Courtum Bellum, or at least like the first round of the Courtum Bellum happening. Nyx ends up bringing home a victory for the freshmen over Aries, which is pretty exciting. I do like how he's having to kind of fight his attraction for her. I'm liking their dynamic. I think it's kind of rare in romance for there to be a super equally yoked hero and heroine, and in this story we definitely have that. Nyx is not only super fiery but like very strong physically, and watching her really succeed in this competition is exciting, especially when contrasted with someone like Kat, who, while I really enjoyed her story, it's just not a very like physical presence. She definitely has that sort of like meek, fragile thing about her. I mean, she definitely is very intelligent and has other strengths, but it's interesting to see Nyx be this like really powerful woman. We're also getting powerful women in some of the other timelines as well. Like Aries' mom is very powerful and very strong-willed, and I just really like her. I think she's awesome. It's very interesting that she's having to like play the part of a meek librarian given like what we're learning about her. And then also Nyx's mom was also incredibly powerful, very good swimmer, ended up giving birth in the ocean, didn't even know she was pregnant. It's cool. I like reading about these really strong women. Yeah, I don't know, it's interesting watching Aries fight his attraction for Nyx and Nyx trying to like figure Aries out. And in the background we're also having like some other things that are making things complicated. So is it Hedian? I don't actually know how to say his name. I say it differently every time I talk about him. Is still trying to figure out who his mother is, and we actually get to meet his mom in one of these flashback scenes, so it seems like everything is kind of like tied up together. I'm hoping though that the plot doesn't just culminate at the very end of the story. I kind of have a fear that that's what's going to happen, which would be frustrating given all of the build up until this point. But I guess you could argue like, oh, if there's build up, how is it really like the entire plot's happening at the end of the book? But we're only getting the flashbacks of what happened in the past, and I would like to see some action in the present day to lead us to end of the story, you know what I mean? Instead of like all of the plot happening at the very end when, you know, Aries makes some grand reveal. I have more faith in Sophie Lark than that. While her romances aren't always completely impressive, I do think her plots are pretty interesting, so I'm hoping that the story doesn't let me down. But I'll be interested to see too what the next book is like. I think I've mentioned it already in this video, but the first 4 books in the series are like a complete series. 5th book is a standalone in the same universe. And I think it's going to be Sabrina's book. I actually can't remember her name. Pretty sure it's Sabrina. Anyway, enjoying it. I will probably just check in with you though once I'm finished because I want to take my makeup off and read the rest of this book. Okay, so I finished The Spy earlier today. Not early today because I don't wake up early, but earlier today. It was disappointing. Was it an entertaining read? Sort of. Was it a mind-blowing romance? No. And again, I think that I'm just coming to discover that Sophie Lark is maybe just not my favorite when it comes to romance. I really require a lot for me to enjoy a romance. I need there to be, I was gonna say angst, tension, and pining. That's not always required, but I think for me, I definitely need there to be a connection there. I need to understand why these characters should be together. There needs to be some sort of like wooing, or at the very least, some like real conversations had. And I felt like this book kind of read as though it was a synopsis of a book. And I have that complaint or critique for quite a few books. Sometimes it seems like the author is just trying to kind of run through the plot as quickly as possible, or the romance as quickly as possible. And it's like, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then I really loved her. And it's like, I don't buy that. I will say that the culmination of plot at the end of the book was kind of fun, I guess, kind of exciting, but it wasn't explosive enough, in my opinion, for it to be the last book in the series. It just didn't feel really all that special. I mean, we did get the whole gang together to like fight crime, but it just felt a little bit lackluster, and I think a really good example of like what I didn't love and what I don't love about Sophie Lark's writing, which feels like a shitty complaint in general to like complain about her writing when I'm reading all of her books. I don't think she's a bad writer. I think my issue here, great example, we end up having Nyx kind of turning against her father, right? Her father is a bad guy. We know he's a bad guy. She doesn't know he's a bad guy. And I was wondering if there was going to be any complexity there. Is her father going to be multi-layered? Is he going to redeem himself? Is there going to be any sort of struggle in Nyx's mind on whether or not she should love her father or not? And we don't really get that. Her father tries to kill her at the end of the book. Her beau ends up killing her dad instead. And then when he asks her after the fact, are you mad that I killed your dad? She's like, no, I think this is what needed to happen. And then we hear nothing about it ever again. And I understand it was the end of the book and like wrap things up, but that's a pretty big move. That's a pretty big thing to happen to a character. And for that not to be explored felt a little bit weak. I just really, really, really value interactions between characters. I want there to be at least some complex emotion there. I want to see each character grow. And I didn't really feel like either of the characters in this book grew at all. In the book prior to this, we do see growth between Kat and Dean in a relationship and as separate individuals. I didn't really see growth within the relationship, and I also really didn't see any growth with Nyx and with Rafe. That's actually his name. The spy is Rafe, who is the son of Ivan, who apparently has his own book, which is fun. Maybe I'll read that eventually. But yeah, I was not blown away by this one. I did like Nyx's character. I liked the idea of her, but we didn't get to like know her well enough to really be invested in her or her story, and that just disappoints me. It's like there was so much potential here, but I just don't feel like it really went anywhere. It was really nice, I will say, to see that like beautiful epilogue and get to see everyone kind of have their happily ever after. Each of the couples in the prior books got their own little like, you know, happily ever after wrap up. There's a wedding at the end. It was nice. It was nice to see, but I don't really understand why like 20-year-olds need to be having babies immediately. Far be it for me to critique a married with babies ending, because I am kind of a sucker for that. That's where I'm at on that book. Like it was fun, but I don't think that it's something that I'm going to like think about forever. If I were to reread any of the books in this series, it would clearly be book 3, and that's the one that I would recommend with Reckless Abandon. I really don't think you need to read any of the other books in the series if you don't want to. I think if you do want the context, maybe read books 2 and 3, but I don't think book 1 is worth reading, I'm gonna be honest. It felt so fucking long, and then book 4 is just kind of whatever. So anyway, I've since moved on to book 5, which I am 20% into, The Savage. I'm enjoying this one, actually. I think this one has the potential to be more interesting than the other books in the series. One of the complaints that I saw on Goodreads by someone I follow was that this book, it does not take place actually at Kingmakers Academy, and they felt like it was too bogged down with the mafia plot. And I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of here for that. I would rather it be a mafia plot than this whole Kingmakers thing, which sounds kind of bad because I like the idea of having this like mafia school. I just don't feel like it was executed in the way that like I would want it to be executed. Regardless, this book is set outside of the academy. It's been pretty juicy up until this point. So we have Sabrina after her freshman year at Kingmaker, so she's 18, going and hanging out with Audric, who we learned about in some of the prior books. At least I think it's pronounced Audric. I feel like I'm taking liberties with the pronunciation of pretty much everybody's name in this video and in this series, so my apologies if it really irks you. It usually irks me. Audric ends up picking up Sabrina after she departs plane? After she leaves the boat from Kingmakers after her freshman year, she ends up going with Audric. They have a steamy night of passion together with another lady. They have dinner together. Like, it's this whole thing, this whole wild adventure one night. And now Audric can't stop thinking about her. And I think Sabrina can't stop thinking about him either. Right off the bat, I really do like how Sabrina is characterized. I feel like her traits are really fun, and I feel like I'm already noticing more connection between these two characters and any of the other characters in the book. They both have this like very spirited personality, very badass, don't take shit from anyone, have a lot of fun, just vibes, right? Sabrina ends up stealing a couple of motorcycles on the first night that they're together. She ends up being very honest about her passions and like what she's into, very much letting Audric know, hey, I very much prefer women, kind of don't really love men. And he's like, you know what, cool, I'm just here for the ride. I'm here to have you have the best experience possible. So she ends up picking up a woman. They end up going back to a hotel, having fun together, and he's never pushy, or I don't know. It was really nice to see, I guess. But then they do have their own like intimate times together, and she's starting to feel feelings for him. He's starting to feel feelings for her, but then they go their separate ways for a few months. And in the timeline that I'm currently in, 3 months have passed, and he is going to visit Sabrina in the States, I think. If you hear any weird groaning, it's the dogs upstairs. Sorry. But that's where I'm at in this book. Do I think the plot is going to be very intriguing? No. Has there been any plot introduced up until this point? Also no. There have been some sort of hints that there could be a plot because Audric is planning to kind of take over, I think, the Bratva in Russia, and he has asked Sabrina to come along. We'll see if that ends up happening. I'm sure that that's going to be the plot of this book, but at this point I don't really care about the plot. I care more so about the character relationships, much like in the third book in the series. I hate making this critique, I really do, but I feel like it has proved to be the case in all of these books. Sophie Lark either has like really, really fun, solid plots or fun relationships, and they don't seem to combine. So if this one stays with like a fun relationship part, I'm fine with it. We'll see as we carry on with this book. I am surprisingly 50% into The Savage. I didn't think I'd get this far this quickly, but you know what? I'm trucking through, and that's what I like to see because I'm gonna be honest, I want to just read some historical romances. Finished Bridgerton the Friday that it came out, and now that's all I want to read. And yet I'm stuck reading these mafia books. honestly just impressed with Sophie Lark's ability to like write a book that's interesting and yet me not feel anything for the romance, like at all. Sabrina and Audric are teaming up to create a party substance that they can sell because they don't have a very strong business, I guess. I mean, Audric's like business is not doing so hot because the goods that he was importing are not very good quality. Feels like he's falling behind in terms of business. He's like, I need to figure out something else. Sabrina suggests that they manufacture and sell their own creation made with the help of one of Audric's wolves because he has a wolf pack, because that's not cheesy at all. She's living in this frat house essentially with a bunch of dudes and she's trying to befriend them and become part of the pack. Also, you know, have a lot of raunchy sex with Audric, and like, I'm just like not loving it. It's not bad. I guess I like that it's not at KINGMAKERS, but it just feels a little bit meaningless. I like don't really understand where the plot's gonna come in. I think at like the 75% mark or at the very end of the book, there's gonna be some sort of conflict. Audric's gonna try to like, you know, become more in charge of the Bratva in Russia or something like that. I just like am not invested. While I am fine with like the dynamic between Sabrina and Audric, like I don't think they have a particularly steamy or incredible romance. I mean, I guess it's steamy because they're constantly having sex, but it just doesn't, I don't care about it. Like I don't care about them, don't really care about their relationship. Like I do like that she's a strong heroine. I like him as a character, but I'm just like, opportunities are being squandered here. Like I'm not as invested as I want to be. And again, I think that could be kind of circumstantial given the fact that like I'm kind of getting bored of the series, but I think had it been interesting, it would have saved it anyway. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's just, it's not my fault, it's the book's fault. Okay, where to begin? I did end up finishing The Savage, and this is probably my least favorite book in the series, which kind of surprises me because I really didn't enjoy the first one. I might agree with people who say that this is one that was a little bit boring and that definitely could have been helped by the world of KINGMAKERS Academy, which again surprises me because I'm not really a KINGMAKERS Academy girl. There are elements that I liked about the school setting, but I was excited to kind of like travel outside of that and to get to see more of the mafia world. I just ultimately didn't end up loving the dynamic between Sabrina and Audric. I think some of the pitfalls of having a really independent heroine are that you're going to have to create conflict there, right? And I think I'm not super in love with how the conflict was shaped here. It was Audric's desire to have a really independent woman, but that is kind of what stood in the way of his happiness and his relationship. And also Sabrina was just maybe a little bit too stubborn and a little bit too dumb. I don't know how else to put it. I don't know. I honestly don't want to go into the details of the ending of this book because frankly, I kind of skimmed and I also just don't really care. There is a bunch of manufacturing of different substances. There's some betrayals that happen and the ending has this big like shootout kind of scene, and eventually we get Sabrina reconciling with Audric despite him treating her kind of like shit. I'm just tired thinking about it, and that's probably why I have no desire to like expand upon just all of the details about why this wasn't my favorite. I think I can understand why people enjoy this book. I think that honestly some of my critiques of Sophie Lark's writing were maybe corrected in this book in some ways, because I do feel like the conflict in terms of the interpersonal conflict had a little bit more of a basis than some of the other books. Like it made sense why there was conflict there. There were layers to the relationship and layers to the conflict, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed because when the conflict involves someone's key personality traits, I think it can just be hard to like recover from that. I personally didn't feel like Audric was really accepting ultimately of who Sabrina was, and it felt like a switch was flipped almost. Like he was willing to do anything for her, and then she like went behind his back once and he was, I don't fucking trust you and I want to control you. It's just, I didn't love it, which sucks because, you know, I thought we were going in a positive direction, but unfortunately I only really enjoyed one of the books in the series. So that is, you know, ultimately pretty disappointing. I'm glad that I did this, and honestly, I hope to do more of these kinds of videos into the future. I'm always just so interested in the series that people tend to absolutely love, and I really do seek to understand the hype of certain series. Like I definitely knew I wanted to read this. I really do eventually want to do a video similar for like Zodiac Academy and for other series like that. Let me know, I guess, in the comments down below, like what sorts of book series you think I should read for this type of video, like where I do a whole, you know, series sort of marathon situation. But I guess we can go ahead and wrap up this video with my like final review, which is to say that I think the KINGMAKERS Academy series would be a really good romance series for you if you're looking for a lot of steam time and you're maybe not a traditional romance reader. Like, let's say you really, really enjoy fantasy, you need a plot heavy book. I think these could be really good for you. I am someone who reads so much romance that I feel like I really need certain things in it. I need certain actions to be taken. I need certain development to happen for it to be a really convincing story for me. But I think if you're someone who doesn't get hung up on the details like that and you really like a plot-driven story, the idea of a mafia, Hogwarts kind of situation excites you, I think you might really, really enjoy these books. In my mind, I have a few people who I would recommend this book series to because I just know that this is something that they'd really, really enjoy. Again, for me, I think the romantic relationship development in pretty much all of the books is just was lacking something for me. But that's okay. I think that it's okay to understand when an author's writing maybe just isn't for you, and to, again, know when a series is really good for other people. So I am glad ultimately that I decided to read these books. I don't think that I'm actually going to make a Brutal Birthright series vlog because I think I've accepted, just generally speaking, that Sophie Lark's writing just isn't totally for me. That's not to say that I wouldn't pick up more of her books in the future. I really did like There Are No Saints. Haven't read the second book in that duology, but I really did like that first book. So yeah, I think I'm open to reading more of her books in the future, but I don't know if I would do another series kind of marathon thing. But let me know again down in the comments what kind of series you want to see me read next, and also what you think of Sophie Lark's books. I'm always curious to hear y'all's opinions. I know some of y'all love her stuff, and then some of y'all have commented on some of my other videos that her stuff doesn't work for you, and I'm just generally excited and interested to know your thoughts and feelings. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I love y'all so much, and until next Sunday.